The 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history, and we're going to show you why. So buckle up. Hi everybody, welcome to the LocaCarnivore. Glad you could join us today. Well, I made a pretty bold assertion there, didn't I? That the 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history. But by golly, it is. I've got 8 reasons why. We're going to count those down, so stay with us all the way to the end of the video where we'll give you the #1 reason why this is the greatest, most significant pistol in history. Alright, first reason why the 1911 is the most significant pistol in history, the greatest pistol in history, is it happens to be the second longest serving service pistol ever produced and ever issued to any military organization. It had served officially as the frontline sidearm for 74 years. It is exceeded only by 2 years with the Webley revolver that was used by the British military for a very long time, obviously 76 years. But this had 74 years. Now the Webley, though, after it was discontinued, it dropped off the map almost completely. The 1911, despite no longer being the official service pistol, was replaced in 1985 by the Beretta 92. And the fanboys can go down in the comments and just rip it up about why the Beretta's better or the 1911's better, blah, blah, blah. But it was replaced officially in 1985. However, it has continued in service. It is used by the Marine Corps, a lot of Special Forces units, Special Operations, should I say. Special Forces is technically the Green Berets. But a lot of Special Forces units still use the 1911. And it is still used in, if you look at law enforcement, it's still all over the place. FBI, HRT, their hostage rescue team uses this. Back on the military side, Delta Force is still using this gun. It is such a good design, it just simply will not die. And more people every year recognize the merits of this gun and they convert to the 1911, or at least buy a 1911 and have one. So it's all over the place. And it served for such a long time, and it went through so many different conflicts. Like I said, it was bested only by 2 years by the Webley, and unlike the Webley, it's still going strong. Well, that was reason number 8 for why the 1911 is the greatest pistol in history. Reason number 7, it is produced in 3 different sizes, and there's even like little micro ones that are based on 1911s. They're not actually 1911s, like SIG makes a little one, and a lot of companies have made one. The old Colt Mustang in 380, that was a 1911 pattern, but it wasn't an actual 1911. But when you get to actual 1911s, this gun comes in 3 really handy sizes. First, there's the full-size government model. This happens to be a 10mm version and 2-tone, obviously. Or you can get the mid-size, which is the old Colt Commander, which came out in the 1950s, and then they have the Combat Commander, which was an all-steel. This happens to be a Springfield version, but it is an alloy frame with a 4 1/4-inch barrel, as opposed to the government model has a 5-inch barrel. And then there's the Officer's ACP, but it is, imagine the Commander with 1 round less in the grip, so it's a 6-round gun, and so the grip is shorter by about almost 3/4 of an inch, give or take, 5/8 of an inch. And then you have a 3-inch and change barrel. It's about 3.5-ish, give or take. You can correct me on that. Please go down in the comments. I'd love for you to just tell me what the truth is on the Officer's ACP for barrel length. So you get 3 different sizes that were introduced and produced by Colt originally. And that makes this gun basically very versatile. If you want a big full-size all-steel gun, you've got your government model. If you want a easier to carry but still has a full-size grip and the full round complement in the magazine, 7 or 8 depending on the magazine you use, and you want a shorter barrel but not so short that it might affect reliability or velocity, the Commander size, quote-unquote Commander size, is perfect for you. And then the Officer's ACP is for much deeper concealment, and maybe you're not concerned about having quite as much round capacity in the gun and everything. However, I will say this about the Officer's ACP. The reason I don't have one to show you, I used to own one back in the day. I found both it and talking to other people and doing research and stuff like that, people who are knowledgeable, armorers, 1911 armorers, and people that have just had a lot of experience with it, that size is a little sketchy on reliability. And I have to admit, my officer's ACP, the only thing it would run was 230 grain ball ammunition, full metal jacket. Now, there's people out there that are going to say, oh, full metal jacket, that's all you ever need. They all fall to hardball. Well, I'll tell you what, we did do a video, and I'll put the link down in the description. We did a video where we gel tested full metal jacket, and you can get the truth in that video as to why it's maybe not your best choice for self-defense. So suffice to say that officer's ACP would not digest a hollow point to save its life or to save my life. So I was kind of disappointed with it, and I have a rule that if guns are not reliable, they don't stick around. And even if I like them, even if I think they're neat, if they won't run, they go away. So it got kicked to the curb, and I don't remember what I got instead or whatever, but it's gone. So the officer's ACP, it's there, but I can't highly recommend it. Can't say enough about the commander size. In my opinion, it is the ideal size for a 1911. It's just superb. It's got a full-size grip, but the barrel's a little shorter, so it gets out of the holster a lot faster and cleaner than the 1911 government model. And you government model fanboys, you're going to kick me in the comments for that too, but go right ahead. I got a thick skin. I love to hear from you. So that's the thing about the 1911 as far as reason number 7 why it's so great. You get 3 different sizes. Reason number 6, and some of these reasons I had as far as picking the order of these, except for the one at the end of the video, the number 1 reason, I kind of had to play around with them a little bit, to be honest with you. They're my choices. You might find that your choices of ordering these things would have been different, but these are my choices for what I see, the reasons why the 1911 is such a great pistol. The greatest in history, frankly, the most significant. Well, reason number 6 is reliability. Now, 1911s, they do have a reputation for sometimes not being reliable, but I will tell you what, if you get one that is properly assembled by a major manufacturer and it's put together correctly by knowledgeable technicians, these guns are quite reliable. Yes, you do have to do a little extra maintenance than, say, a polymer framed striker gun or something like that, that they can just kind of go without a lot of lubrication and you cannot clean them for a while and everything. The 1911, it's an older gun. I mean, it was introduced over a century ago. It shows that. But if you treat it right and you understand its little ins and outs, the gun will be very reliable. In fact, if we go all the way back to the trials when this gun was being developed by Browning and by Colt, by John Browning, and put into and submitted for the trials, the Army spent close to 5 years trying to 4 or 5 years trying to figure out what pistol they were going to adopt. In 1910, though, they had narrowed the competition down to the 1911 and the Savage entry, which was just basically Savage just upsized their smaller pistol to fit .45 caliber. And they had standardized on that .45 ACP cartridge because that's what the military wanted based on the Thompson-Lagarde study of roughly almost a decade before that, where they decided .45 was probably the best caliber for their service pistol. So the runoff competition between the Savage and the Colt design in 1910, one test that the Army dreamed up was, let's shoot 6,000, not 1,000, not 500, not 2,000, 6,000 rounds with the gun without bothering to stop and clean it or do anything like that and see how many stoppages we get. Well, the Savage went through this test and it had 30 some odd, I think the number was about 32 or so, 34 stoppages during the course of 6,000 rounds. But the Colt design, the Browning design submitted by Colt, it went through all 6,000 rounds without a single stoppage. And what's more, when the gun would get hot during this trial, they wouldn't sit there and let it cool down and, go take a coffee break, you'll get lunch for an hour. No, they took the thing, they dunked it in some water until it cooled off, and then they took it back out, didn't do anything else to it, reloaded it, and just kept on running. So this gun went through 6,000 rounds, being dunked repeatedly in water to cool it off. God knows what that was doing to the heat-treated metals and everything, but it obviously didn't affect it. And it had 0 stoppages in 6,000 rounds. It's just an amazing, amazing feat for this gun. And it just shows you how reliable this gun could be, even when it's in somewhat adverse conditions. But yes, you do have to maintain it, you do have to clean it. And the modern versions, well, if you went back and got, like a Colt gun, I had several actual Colt guns back that were made in the 70s and 80s, and they were, and one was made, I think, in the early 90s, give or take. They were fussy with hollow points. That was back in the day when you had to get a 1911 Guru to like really smooth and work the ramps on it, the feed ramps in the barrel and the frame and all that, and get it all set up and clearance it just right. And then it would generally run hollow points. But back then, of course, hollow points were not as well designed as they are now. The ammunition companies have gotten really smart over the decades, and they've designed their bullets to not only be reliable when they hit the target and, perform correctly through barriers or whatever they're designed to go through and still function, but they emphasized feed reliability. So a modern hollow point in a modern produced 1911, made by a quality manufacturer, shouldn't have any problems with hollow points. In fact, we did a hollow point test with this mil-spec, and I did a video on that, and I'll put the link down in the description again, and you can go see what this mil-spec did with hollow points. And I had zero expectation that this would work very well with hollow points, yet it did quite well. Again, go check out the video. I think you'll really enjoy that and see how well these guns can work and how reliable they can be. Alrighty then, we get to reason number 5 why the 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history. And by the way, folks, if you wouldn't mind, give us a big like. Just smash that thumbs up button for us. We want you on the LocaCarnivore team, so please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss any of our great videos. Reason number 5 for the 1911 is it is the first big bore semi-automatic service pistol ever produced. And a lot of people are going, oh, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about everything? Well, the truth of the matter is, as far as actually adopted pistols, this was the first big bore. The Luger was 9mm, and it happened to be the first viable semi-automatic pistol ever adopted by a major military organization. That was in 1906 with the German Navy, and then in 1908 with the German Army, hence the P08 designation for the Luger. But that was in 9mm. Now, they did make a couple, which are super rare. They made some 45s to compete against this design in the U.S. Army trials before 1911. But that gun was never adopted. So it was never adopted. It was not an actual service pistol. And before that, like you go back to the Borchardt design, that was a 7mm roughly offering, 7.5mm give or take. The Mauser C96, again, was in 7.62 or 63, I think 7.63. So again, it's a 30 caliber design. This in 45, this 1911 in 45 is the first big bore. Now, everybody goes, well, what about the Webley? Well, yes, the Webley came out in 1910, but it wasn't adopted by the British military until 1912. So the Colt design, the 1911, M1911, beat the Webley by 1 year. And I don't care if you win by an inch or win by a mile, as they said in the Fast and Furious, it's still a win. So the 1911, it's the first big bore. And that was a huge step forward in a lot of cases. Now everybody I know, they've gone back to 9mm and all that, which it's a good cartridge. It's a very good cartridge. But if you want that, there's something about this big, almost half-inch bore, that's just that heavy slug going out the barrel that just gives you a certain sense of comfort. Now, does the 45 perform markedly better than the 1911? And here come the 45 fanboys. You guys are going to, again, go down in the comments, rip me up. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me why the 45 is such a great cartridge versus the 9mm. But nonetheless, there's something about that big, wide wound track that the 45 can make. So again, it's the first big bore service pistol. Reason number 4, the 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history. Well, frankly, it is easy to carry. Now, yes, the government model is a pretty heavy gun, but if you go to something like this Commander size, Commander in quotes, sorry Colt, I know that's your brand, and it's registered, blah, 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 but let's just, for sake of the term, let's just call it a Commander size gun. And an alloy frame, it's pretty darn light. It's not so light you can't shoot it well. With a little bit of determination and practice, you can master the gun. The recoil's not that bad in 45. And if you want, get a 9mm. Frankly, 9mm 1911s don't have the best rep for reliability. If you get a good one, you got a good one. But sometimes they can be fussy. But a commander size gun in a proper cartridge like 45 should be quite reliable, but it's easy to carry, and the reason is the gun is very thin. It's extremely thin, and this one has the thin line grips on it, which make it even thinner. These guns in a proper holster will just practically disappear under any clothing, and I mean even a light shirt. In fact, I did a video not too long ago about how to carry a full-size gun in summer. Links down in the description, you want to check that out as well. And it will take you through all the ins and outs of carrying a big gun like this, even in the summertime under light clothing. But it is so thin, and in the slide, this is what makes it very easy to carry for an inside the waistband type of carry. The thinness, this slide on the 1911 is actually right about an inch wide, almost, actually I think it's just a touch under an inch wide. Compare that to any double stack gun on the market except for the Browning High Power, which has a thin slide, but the grip is big to accommodate the magazine. Genius design. Thank you again, John Browning. At any rate, the 1911, because of this thinness, it's super easy to carry. It doesn't bulge much in the waistband, and it's very comfortable because it's not pulling your belt out as far, even with a holster. And it's just a superb gun as far as carrying it is concerned. If you want a gun that's easy to carry, but still a full-size gun with a full-size grip, so you don't have to have your pinky wrapping under it or something like that, great choice. Right? Reason number 3 why the 1911 is such a fantastic gun, the greatest gun in history, handgun in history, pistol, the most significant pistol in history, is the trigger. The trigger on these guns are superb as a general rule. Now the old GI guns, like if you look at this mil-spec, the trigger is not necessarily the best. I mean, it's got a lot of uptake, it can be very creepy, the break is not super crisp. However, if you get one where the trigger has been set up correctly, they are super crisp, short travel, very crisp, clean break. We'll take it, again, these guns they're safety checked, but the trigger on these is fantastic. It's a single action trigger, so you don't have to worry about like the double action, single action, like on the Berettas, which most people are familiar with, which was started by Walther of Germany on their model PP in the 1920s, and then the PPK and the P38, P1, etc. But that migrated across a lot of different platforms. Beretta, for instance, Smith & Wesson. It's been used all over the place. However, that's got that long, hard trigger pull for the first shot, and then you get single action subsequently. But even the single actions on those guns are not quite as good as the single action on the 1911. And this is just a superb gun. It's just got a short uptake and then just a quick release. Fantastic. Now, why is that important? Why does that make this the greatest, most significant pistol in history? Well, that single action trigger, that crisp, clean, short, absolutely kind of glass rod type break of a trigger means that you keep the gun on target much easier. It is a more accurate gun in the sense that it's easier to shoot accurately. That trigger pull is so short and crisp that the gun doesn't move around much, if at all, when you're firing it. And it also means that the reset is going to be, so we're going to fire it, cycle it. Isn't that fantastic? Just a tiny bit, and then again, you can fire it. Don't dry fire your 1911s very much. It's not good on the guns, even the modern guns, but especially if you have an older gun, don't do a lot of it. I'm just doing it for you for demonstration purposes. I generally don't dry fire my 1911s. However, you could see how in rapid fire, that short reset enables you to really get back on the trigger very quickly and get rounds down range quickly, but the gun's not being disturbed as much because of that short trigger pull. It's not like a double action revolver or, again, even a striker fire gun. I would say the best striker fire triggers still are nowhere near what a decent 1911 trigger is like. And you get one that's really tuned, nothing else will match it. I don't care what kit you put in your striker fire gun, and I'm not running down strikers. You know, I've got them, I like them, I use them. They have their place in the world, but if you want that super crisp trigger pull, and this is why organizations like FBI's HRT, the Hostage Rescue Team, they use a 1911 because when you have that tuned action, you can make that money shot if you have to. And that is shooting past a hostage's head to take out a hostage taker whose head's just, peeking out a little bit behind that. They have to be extremely precise about that, and the 1911 provides that precision. So again, trigger. Reason number 3 why the 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history. All right, we're counting down. There's 2 more reasons, or actually 1 more reason to go before the ultimate number 1 reason why the 1911 is such a great pistol, the greatest in history. And while you're at it, if you're looking for more content, we do have a website, LocaCarnivore.com. Go on over there, you can get more content. Plus, you can hit on the store tab at the top of the frame and get some cool LocaCarnivore merchandise, great gift ideas. And don't forget, we do have a Patreon. We'd appreciate your support there. Links in the description for both the website and the Patreon. Thank you so much. Reason number 2, then, why the 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history is safety. Now, everybody looks at this thing, especially if it's got, the hammer's back on the gun and it's cocked and locked, and they're like, ooh, that's scary, that hammer's back, and it's just ready to go off, and it's such a scary gun. The reality is quite different. In fact, this whole gun is one of the safest to operate. In my opinion, it's actually the safest pistol out there, once you understand its mechanisms. Now, if you don't understand this pistol, it could bite you in a heartbeat. So you do have to have some training. You do have to understand the systems in the gun. But this has more safeties than just about any other pistol design ever produced. First of all, it has a half-cock notch for the hammer. So even if all the safeties fail, see if I can find, there you go. Hopefully you can see that. But it's got a half-cock notch so that the hammer does fall, it hits that half-cock and it won't, it'll hit that half-cock. What can I do? It's going to take a lot of takes. So it'll hit that half-cock and it won't hit the firing pin. So that's one of the first safeties. Then, of course, there is the thumb safety on it, which is fantastic. Now, you do have to learn to operate that safety with your thumb in order to, as you present the gun to the target, take it off, but you can put the safety right back on, and it's immediately safe, and you can bring the gun back, and it's completely safe. Now, we also have the grip safety. Now, there's a lot of controversy over the grip safety. Some people hate them, some people like them. The reality is the grip safety was put on the gun at the request of the U.S. Army during the trials period when the gun was being modified and eventually adopted in 1911. And primarily it was driven by the United States Cavalry because they wanted a gun where if the cavalry trooper were to drop the weapon accidentally, which can happen when you're bouncing around on a horse, they wanted the gun to be inert the second it left the trooper's hand. So that grip safety, once it's released, the gun, even if the thumb safety is off, if the grip safety is not engaged, the hammer's not going anywhere. And they actually tested this. Now, you might want to check me on this. This might be an apocryphal story, but I read somewhere where during the trials period, they were concerned, the Army was concerned about that very same thing, that the gun could go off if it was dropped and with the hammer back. So they actually took it to the top of a building, is my understanding, and they threw it off the top of a building at least several times with the hammer back and the safety off, and the gun never failed. The hammer never went down and hit the firing pin. So everything worked in the gun to make sure that it didn't go off. So they were quite satisfied that if it dropped from the distance from a horse to the ground, the gun would be fine, even if the thumb safety was not engaged. And then, of course, if you get a Series 80 pistol, because there's Series 70 guns, which go back to the original gun, like this mil-spec here, does not have a firing pin block. So you do not carry the gun with the hammer down on a live round. That is potentially asking for trouble. So there's 2 modes to carry a Series 70 or one of the older guns, military spec type guns, and that is either chamber empty, condition 3, chamber empty, and the hammer down, or if you're going to carry it with a round in the chamber, you want the hammer back and that grip safety engaged. That's called, not grip safety, pardon me, the thumb safety engaged. And that's called carrying it cocked and locked, or condition 1. According to Jeff Cooper, he had 3 conditions: condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. 3 being, again, chamber empty, hammer down. Condition 2 was round in the chamber, hammer down, which you shouldn't do. And then there was condition 1, which is cocked and locked, hammer back, thumb safety engaged. So if you've got one of those pistols, there's not a hammer block. But if you get a Series 80, which was Colt's attempt to make the gun even safer, that has a firing pin block in it. And what that means is that even if everything else fails and the hammer does drop on the gun without the trigger having been pulled, the firing pin cannot go forward. It's physically blocked from going forward. So it's a very safe gun. Now, the downside of the Series 80 Colts with that firing pin block is some people say, and people who are experts on it, they claim that that kind of muddies up the trigger pull. It makes it a little heavier, and it makes it hard to make a really tuned trigger. So Series 70 and earlier type 1911s are favored for, or Series 70 type actions are favored for that better, crisper trigger pull. Now, if you want the gun to be a little bit safer and you can handle that little bit of, and in like a service type gun or something, I think that little, I've had both Series 70 and Series 80 guns. I haven't noticed any difference, but I'm sure there's somebody out there that has a very educated trigger finger that would notice the difference. I think though in a service gun, it's irrelevant. All right, the moment you've been waiting for, you stayed with us all the way through the end of the video. Thank you so much for doing that, and you're going to get your reward now. The number one reason why the 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history is the Browning tilting barrel action. And it's the locking system on the gun. When this gun cycles, I'll lock it back, the barrel tilts down. What happens is, as the slide comes back, there's a link below the barrel, and as the gun goes back, it stays locked up for a short distance, and then that link starts to pull the barrel down out of engagement. There's some locking lugs in the slide, and matching lugs machined into the barrel. You can see the picture of the barrel there and all that. And that mates with the slide, and that's what actually locks the gun and keeps it safe until the pressure drops. But once the bullet's out of the barrel, and the time it takes for that slide and barrel to recoil together, that's enough to get the bullet out of the barrel and have the pressure drop to a safe level so you can open the action. But that barrel tilts down and then lets the slide continue back. The barrel stops against the frame, the slide continues back, extracts the empty case, it hits the ejector, and out it spits out of the ejection port. And then, of course, then the gun goes back into battery, strips in the new round off the magazine and into the chamber, and you're ready to go again. But that tilting barrel system was the first of its kind, and it was an absolute revolution. Before, you had all sorts of gimcrack things like, blowback or slightly delayed blowback. You had the toggle of knee-type action on the Luger, which was borrowed, basically ripped off from the Borchardt. Thank you, Georg Luger. He ripped off his employer. And how he got around that patent, I don't know, but he certainly did. And so you had that type of action. And so this 1911 action with the tilting barrel, it influenced every pistol that came after the 1911. It was just a complete game changer. It allowed pistols to be made with a very simple, direct action that didn't require a lot of moving parts, and it was improved over time, but the basic principle still remained, and that was locking lugs machined into the barrel and the top of the slide underneath, and then you had the gun recoil slightly back, and then the barrel was pulled down in some fashion. That link was later dispensed with because John Browning was never super satisfied with that system. And you get the Browning P35 high power, which was the follow-on design. Browning started it, but he died before he could finish it, so it was finished up by the engineers at FN in Herstal, Belgium. But what they did was they made just a little bit of a cam thing, and you can see that in all the guns nowadays. Like, you pick up any Glock, you pick up a SIG, you pick up anything, and they've got a cam system, which again tilts that barrel down as the gun recoils. It just was a complete revolution. Nobody had thought of it before good old John Browning did. And then the only major improvement beyond that was to dispense with the locking lugs when SIG dreamed up the system of just having the top of the barrel, the chamber, actually set into the ejection port, and that would lock up the gun. So you eliminated the machining process, and that's been used by SIG. You look at any Glock, most any striker-fired pistol, they all have that system. I call it the SIG lockup system, whether anybody else calls it that, but that's what I do to differentiate it from the swinging link type system of the Browning, or what uses the locking lugs machined into the slide. So that was the only major upgrade, was to go to a camming system instead of link, and then again SIG switching to the chamber, the actual barrel interfacing with the top, with the ejection port to form the locking system. But that tilting barrel, again, was an absolute revolution. Without it, we wouldn't be where we are. Thank you, John Browning. Thank you, Colt. Thank you, 1911. Greatest, most significant pistol in history. Well, there you go. Those are my 8 reasons why the 1911 is the greatest, most significant pistol in history. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for spending your valuable time with us today. And remember, as always, Han shot first. Thanks for watching.